Welcome to today's deep dive. We are jumping straight into some incredibly fascinating, raw data from a massive February 2026 Gallup poll, originally reported by Fox 9. In a media landscape that constantly feels pretty chaotic, sometimes you just have to go back to the foundational survey data. It gives us that much-needed clarity to figure out exactly what is genuinely driving national sentiment right now. So to really understand where we are as a country, we have to start with a super direct question. What do Americans actually think is our biggest problem right now? Gallup went out and asked this exact question to U.S. adults between February 2nd and February 16th. Now, timing here is literally everything. Keep in mind, this temperature check happened right before the geopolitical landscape shifted dramatically with those late February military strikes on Iran. Because of that, this data gives us this pristine, untouched look at domestic priorities right before foreign policy swept in and took over the headlines. Well, when the results came back, one number totally stole the show. 29%. Yep, nearly a third of the country all pointed to the exact same issue as our absolute greatest national hurdle. When you have nearly 1 in 3 Americans agreeing on what the top problem is, especially in an era as deeply polarized as ours, you absolutely have to pay attention. All right, here's our roadmap for peeling back the layers of this poll. First, America's top problem today. Second, the deep partisan divide. Third, a historical perspective. And finally, immigration and the economy. Starting right off with America's top problem today, government and political leadership. Get this, that massive 29% chunk of the country, they didn't say crime. They didn't say healthcare, and they definitely didn't say foreign policy. The number one concern for Americans right now is actually some aspect of their own government, Congress or politicians. That's the umbrella category. The American people are looking right at the leadership structure itself and saying, hey, that right there is the biggest issue we have. It's a pretty profound statement about the relationship between the public and the very institutions designed to serve them. And you might be thinking, oh, maybe that's just a quick spike. No way. This is a consistent, dominant trend. If we track the last 3 months, in December, it sat at 26%. Then in January, it spiked up to 32%. And here in February, it leveled out slightly to 29%. This means that for an entire quarter, the government itself has been anchored firmly at the very top of the public's worry list. It's not a reaction to a single news cycle. It's a sustained baseline of institutional skepticism.
But honestly, a nationwide average only gives us half the story, right? That brings us to the deep partisan divide, where we have to ask, who is actually driving these numbers?
This is where it gets super interesting. This concern is absolutely not evenly distributed. A staggering 44% of Democrats cited the government as the top issue, compared to 24% of independents and just 19% of Republicans. The Democrats are overwhelmingly fueling this data right now. In fact, that 44% metric is huge because it perfectly ties the all-time high previously recorded a year ago in February 2025, which was right at the start of President Trump's second term. When one specific demographic is expressing this level of heightened concern, it basically elevates the entire national average. Now, when we look at the specific reasons people gave, it's like 2 entirely different conversations are happening at the exact same time. Democrats who named the government specifically pointed to President Trump or problems they associate with his administration, things like corruption and executive overreach. Meanwhile, the Republicans who named the government, they pointed their fingers in the exact opposite direction. They primarily criticized Democrats, perceived corruption on the left, or just general partisan gridlock. And those independents sitting right in the middle, their responses were a mixed bag of concerns about Trump and broader frustrations with U.S. politics overall. So we have this broad agreement that the government is the problem, but total disagreement on who exactly within the government is to blame. Let's move on to a historical perspective, looking back to the year 2000. To really grasp how unique our current political vibe is, we gotta zoom out. Look at this. From the year 2000 all the way to 2016, mentions of the government as our top problem averaged just 10%. For over a decade and a half, it rarely even broke the 20% mark. But watch what happens next. During the Biden presidency, the average climbed to 19%. During President Trump's first term, it pushed higher to an average of 24%. And over the past year, it has surged to an average of 27%. We're witnessing a slow but absolutely undeniable erosion of faith in the functional capacity of our political system over the last 2 decades. It is a fundamental shift in how Americans view their own capital. Now, while government dysfunction totally dominates the top spot, we can't ignore what's happening just below it. Let's look at immigration and the economy, the runner-up concerns. Breaking down the rest of the poll, we can see exactly where the country's attention is focused next. Immigration emerged as the definitive second choice at 20%, Following that, we see general economic concerns sitting at 11%, and specifically inflation and high prices coming in at 8%. Basically, outside of the government itself, the border and the wallet are the two things occupying the minds of the American public. But hang on, let's look closer at that immigration figure for a second, because there's a hidden shockwave in there. Immigration concern didn't just casually sit at 20%, it literally doubled. It skyrocketed from 10% in January to 20% in February. A full 10-point jump in a matter of weeks is an incredible spike in public opinion. In the polling world, shifts of 1 or 2 points are pretty standard, but a sudden 10-point surge, that tells us something massive happened in the real world to trigger that kind of anxiety. The source data maps out exactly what caused this. In January, there were these highly publicized federal immigration enforcement operations, where ICE agents unfortunately killed 2 U.S. citizens, Renee Good and Alex Pretty. Shortly after this incident, the White House sent border czar Tom Homan directly to Minneapolis to take over ICE operations there. These high-profile incidents thrust federal immigration enforcement into the absolute center of the media cycle. And right on cue, we see that resulting February spike jump up to 20%. It is a perfect example of how rapidly public priorities shift in response to major national news events. So that brings us to the big takeaway today. We've seen how almost a third of the country believes our own government is our greatest obstacle. We've seen how a single month of intense news can literally double public anxiety over immigration. And most importantly, we've seen how deeply divided we are on the root causes of these problems based on our political affiliations. So I want to leave you with this to chew on. As national priorities continue to rapidly shift based on current events, how will this deep partisan divide shape the future of our political landscape? I mean, can a nation tackle its toughest issues when it can't even agree on what the government's role in the problem actually is? Thank you so much for joining me for this analysis. Keep asking those tough questions, keep looking at the data, and we will catch you next time.